The champagne flute trembled in my hand as I watched my sister Emma twirl in her wedding dress, the same ivory silk that should have been mine. Again, the familiar ache of betrayal twisted in my chest, but this time I wasn't the broken woman crying in the bathroom. This time I was reborn with a plan that would make them all pay. Isn't she just radiant? Mom gushed to the photographer, her voice carrying across the bridal suite like nails on a chalkboard. My beautiful daughter, marrying into the Morrison family. Such a perfect match. The scent of Emma's jasmine perfume, the same fragrance she'd worn to seduce David at my own engagement party, filled the air like a toxic cloud. I stepped deeper into the shadows by the service entrance, adjusting my simple black server's uniform. The polyester fabric scratched against my skin, a reminder of how far I'd fallen and how high I'd climbed back up. None of them recognized me. How could they? In my first life, I'd been Maya Chen, the forgettable adopted daughter who died alone and penniless at 28. A woman so unremarkable that even her own family had erased her from their Christmas cards within 6 months of her funeral. Now I was Sophie Laurent, tech billionaire and founder of Nexus Industries. 35, confident, and completely invisible to the family that destroyed me. The surgical alterations had been subtle but effective: a refined nose, higher cheekbones, different hair color. Death had given me the ultimate makeover. Emma was marrying David Morrison, the man who'd been my fiancé before she stole him with her tears and manufactured vulnerability. The same David who'd promised me forever while secretly planning his future with my sister behind my back. The man who'd whispered that he loved my kindness while finding my sister's cruelty more exciting. The gift table needs to be set up in the main hall, the wedding coordinator announced, her clipboard trembling as she checked items off her list. The Morrison family expects quite the display. Mrs. Morrison specifically mentioned the importance of proper presentation. Perfect. I slipped out of the bridal suite, my pulse steady despite the chaos around me. After all, I had the most valuable gifts of all waiting in my car. Gifts that would change everything, just like David's betrayal had changed me 7 years ago. The main ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and white roses, every detail perfect and expensive. The kind of wedding I dreamed of having with David before Emma decided she wanted him more. Just like Emma always demanded. Just like our parents always provided. For her, never for me. I began arranging the gift table with methodical precision, each wrapped box representing someone's hopes for the happy couple's future. The Waterford crystal from the senator's wife, the Hermes serving set from David's college roommate, the antique silver from his grandmother, a woman who'd never even acknowledged my existence when I was engaged to her precious grandson. "Excuse me, miss?" Victoria Morrison, David's mother, approached with her usual imperious air, her diamonds catching the light like tiny weapons. "I specifically requested the Baccarat crystal be displayed prominently. These gifts are from very important people." Her voice carried the same dismissive tone she'd used when telling David I wasn't suitable for their family. "Too common," she'd said. "Too grateful for their attention. A charity case pretending to belong in their world." "Of course, Mrs. Morrison." I kept my voice low, professional, letting just a hint of a French accent color my words. "Everything will be perfect." She looked right through me, just as she always had. In my past life, she'd made it clear I wasn't good enough for her precious son. My parents might have been professors, but they weren't the right kind of intellectuals. We had education but no money, class but no connections. If only she knew she was talking to the woman whose company had just acquired Morrison Industries' biggest competitor. The woman whose holding company now owned the mortgage on this very hotel. The woman who could destroy their family empire with a single phone call. But patience was key. The best revenge was a dish served when your enemies least expected it, seasoned with their own arrogance and garnished with their deepest fears. I positioned each gift carefully, noting the names and their significance. The senator who'd voted against my first life's immigration bill, the one that would have helped families like the Chens. The judge who'd ruled against my wrongful death suit when my adoptive parents tried to claim I'd been murdered. The banker who'd foreclosed on my childhood home after my funeral expenses drained their savings. They were all here, celebrating Emma's triumph with champagne that cost more than most people's monthly salary. The same people who'd turned their backs when my family needed help, now eager to curry favor with the Morrison dynasty. My fingers found the small silver box in my pocket, the first of my own gifts. Inside was a USB drive containing financial records that would make tonight very interesting indeed. Transaction logs, shell company documents, offshore account statements. The kind of evidence that could topple governments or, in this case, destroy a wedding. The photographer snapped endless pictures of Emma's perfect smile as she greeted guests with theatrical joy. David stood beside her in his designer tuxedo, playing the devoted groom with Oscar-worthy performance. They looked so happy, so in love, so convinced of their own invincibility. Just like they had at my funeral, where they'd announced their engagement over my casket while the dirt was still fresh on my grave. I could still hear Emma's tearful speech about how Maya would have wanted us to be happy and how love conquers all obstacles, even death. The memory burned like acid in my veins, but I pushed it down. Tonight wasn't about the past, it was about the future I'd built from the ashes of their betrayal. 2 hours until the ceremony, time to begin phase 1 of my carefully orchestrated revenge. I made my way to the hotel's business center, my heels clicking against the marble floor with satisfying authority. The sound echoed through the empty corridor like a countdown timer, each step bringing me closer to justice. The computer logged in easily with the access codes I'd memorized, another benefit of owning the parent company that owned this establishment. Being dead had its advantages. No one monitored Maya Chen's old accounts anymore, and Sophie Laurent's credentials opened doors that had been slammed in my face before. The first document loaded with agonizing slowness: Morrison Industries' quarterly report. David's father had built an empire on government contracts and strategic partnerships, but empires built on lies had a tendency to crumble when the foundation shifted. The numbers told a story of creative accounting and inflated profits that would make the SEC very interested. The second document was more personal and infinitely more damaging: Emma's prenatal vitamins prescription dated 3 months ago. The same prescription she'd been hiding in a safety deposit box I'd gained access to through my network of private investigators, so that's why the rushed engagement and hurried wedding. Emma was pregnant, and the Morrison family's conservative values couldn't tolerate a bastard heir tarnishing their reputation. How perfectly predictable, how utterly exploitable. I uploaded the documents to a secure server in Switzerland, then deleted the browser history with military precision. Every keystroke was calculated, every digital footprint carefully erased. I'd learned to be thorough in my second life, paranoid in ways that had kept me alive and anonymous for 7 years. Back in the ballroom, guests were arriving in designer gowns and tailored suits, their laughter sharp as broken glass. I watched familiar faces fill the space, cataloging each one like evidence in a criminal trial. Mrs. Patterson, my elementary school teacher who'd always favored Emma's theatrical presentations over my quiet excellence. Dr. Reynolds, the guidance counselor who'd steered me toward community college while pushing Emma toward Harvard with glowing recommendations in strategic networking. The family doctor who'd prescribed me antidepressants instead of investigating why a previously happy child had become withdrawn and suicidal. The social worker who'd ignored my reports of emotional abuse, charmed by Emma's manipulative tears and our parents' middle-class respectability. They'd all contributed to my downfall in small, seemingly insignificant ways, choosing Emma over me again and again until the pattern became prophecy. Tonight, they'd learned the cumulative cost of that loyalty. "This is absolutely gorgeous," I heard Mrs. Chen, my former mother, gush to a group of family friends. "Emma has such exquisite taste. She's always been our artistic one, so naturally gifted." The words cut deep, even after all these years. Emma's artistic gifts had been funded by my inheritance, the trust fund from my biological parents that our adoptive parents had systematically drained to pay for her dance lessons, art supplies, and private tutoring. I wheeled a cart of Dom Perignon toward the gift table, using the motion to conceal my real purpose. 3 small boxes joined the display, each wrapped in elegant silver paper with tiny name cards written in calligraphy. To any casual observer, they looked like thoughtful wedding gifts from a generous guest. In reality, they contained stock certificates for shares in Nexus Industries. Not just any shares, controlling shares, voting shares, shares that came with very specific strings attached. enough to make David and Emma very wealthy or very vulnerable to my manipulation, depending on how they chose to play the game I'd designed for them. But that was the beauty of my gift. They had no idea what they were about to receive or what accepting it would cost them. The string quartet began their prelude as guests took their seats in perfectly arranged rows. I positioned myself near the back wall, invisible among the other servers, a ghost in black polyester haunting the celebration of my own destruction. From here, I had a perfect view of the proceedings and easy access to the gift table when the moment came for my grand revelation. The lighting was dramatic, designed to flatter the bride and groom while casting shadows that would hide my movements until I chose to step into the spotlight. Emma walked down the aisle like a conquering queen, claiming her rightful throne, her train flowing behind her like liquid ivory. The dress caught the light beautifully, every bead and crystal chosen to perfection, every seam tailored to her exact measurements. It was the same dress I'd tried on 7 years ago, the one I'd put on hold while saving for the deposit. The one Emma had bought the day after my funeral with money from my life insurance policy, according to the credit card statements I'd obtained through less than legal channels. Our mother wept with theatrical joy in the front row, her mascara running in perfectly timed streams. Our father beamed with pride, his chest puffed out like a peacock displaying his finest feathers. The family complete at last with their true daughter finally getting her fairy tale ending. David's expression was harder to read. He looked nervous, distracted, his eyes darting around the crowd as if searching for threats. Did he ever think about me? Did he remember the promises he'd made before Emma convinced him that love was a luxury he couldn't afford? Probably not. Men like David didn't waste time on regrets when better options presented themselves. Sentiment was for the weak, loyalty for the naive. I'd learned that lesson the hard way. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom like a funeral dirge. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of David Morrison and Emma Chen in holy matrimony. Holy matrimony, built on lies, funded by theft, celebrated by people who'd enabled every cruel act that led to this moment. If there was a God, he had a twisted sense of humor. Do you, David Morrison, take Emma Chen to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, till death do you part?" "I do." David's voice was steady, confident, carrying the same authority he'd used when breaking up with me, the same tone he'd employed when explaining that Emma needed him more and that I was strong enough to handle this. "And do you, Emma Chen, take David Morrison to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, till death do you part?" "I do." Emma's smile was radiant, triumphant, the expression of a woman who'd never been denied anything she truly wanted. She'd coveted David from the moment I'd introduced them, and now she wore him like a trophy, proof of her superiority over her adopted sister. "You may kiss the bride." The guests erupted in applause as David and Emma sealed their union with a kiss that looked passionate but felt performed. I felt nothing watching them. No pain, no anger, just the cold satisfaction of a hunter watching prey walk into a perfectly constructed trap. They thought they'd gotten away with everything. They thought they'd buried me so deep that I'd never claw my way back to the surface. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The reception began with dinner and dancing, the guests dividing into their natural social hierarchies like oil separating from water. I circulated among the tables with professional invisibility, refilling water glasses and clearing plates while listening to conversations that would have broken my heart in my first life. Now they were simply intelligence, data points in my larger strategy of social archaeology. Every whispered comment, every casual cruelty, every moment of willful blindness was cataloged and stored for future use. "Emma looks absolutely glowing," Mrs. Morrison told a table of family friends, her voice carrying the satisfaction of a woman whose plans had come to fruition. "Of course, we're hoping for grandchildren soon. The Morrison legacy must continue, and David needs an heir to secure his position in the company." If only she knew how soon those grandchildren might arrive. Emma's secret would come out eventually, probably when the baby bump became impossible to hide under designer clothing. But by then, my own plans would be fully in motion, and the Morrison family would have bigger problems than unexpected pregnancies. The girl has done well for herself, Senator Crawford commented, cutting his prime rib with surgical precision. From what I understand, the Chen family isn't exactly old money. David's marrying down, but sometimes fresh blood is exactly what these old families need. Marrying down. The phrase stung more than I'd expected, carrying echoes of every snub and slight I'd endured during my brief engagement to David. The quiet suggestions that I wasn't quite suitable, the subtle exclusions from family events, the constant reminders that I was lucky to be accepted at all. Judge Patterson nodded in agreement, his jowls wobbling with each movement. The Morrison boy could have married anyone. European royalty, old Boston families, heiresses with actual bloodlines. Instead, he chooses an adopted Asian girl from a middle-class academic family. It's almost admirable, really. Democratic. As if David's choice was some kind of charitable act. A noblesse oblige gesture that reflected well on his character. As if Emma was lucky to be chosen, rather than David being fortunate to win her. The gift opening was scheduled for after the first dance, a tradition that would transform into the centerpiece of my revenge. Traditional, romantic, perfectly timed for maximum impact when the entire room would be focused on the happy couple. I checked my Cartier watch, a gift I'd bought myself with my first billion-dollar acquisition. 30 minutes remaining. Time to plant the final pieces of my carefully constructed puzzle. I slipped into the hotel manager's office, my universal keycard. A perk of owning the holding company that owned this establishment, granting easy access to systems that most people could only dream of reaching. The computer network was child's play to navigate after years of building technological empires from scratch. A few keystrokes later, and every screen in the building would display my message when I triggered the command remotely. Television monitors, digital displays, even the electronic wedding program boards would become instruments of revelation when the moment was right. The beauty of being dead was that no one suspected Maya Chen of anything anymore. She was a ghost, a sad footnote in the Chen family history. Sophie Laurent, however, was a different story entirely. She was careful, methodical, and very much in control of her own destiny. Back in the ballroom, the first dance was beginning under a spotlight that turned the couple into living porcelain figures. Emma and David swayed to At Last, their faces glowing with happiness and champagne, their bodies moving in perfect synchronization. The same song that had been our song in my previous life, the melody David had hummed while proposing in this very hotel's garden. How perfectly Emma to steal even that memory, to claim ownership of every moment that had once brought me joy. "Ladies and gentlemen," the bandleader announced as the song ended with theatrical flourish, "the bride and groom will now open their gifts." This was it. The moment I'd been planning for 3 years, ever since I'd pulled myself out of the gutter of my rebirth and decided that success was the ultimate revenge. The culmination of careful strategy, patient investment, and absolute dedication to justice. I moved closer to the gift table, my heart hammering against my ribs despite my outward calm. Around me, guests began forming a semicircle, their champagne flutes catching the light like tiny weapons as they prepared to witness the traditional display of wealth and generosity. Emma and David took their seats at the head table, surrounded by mountains of silver and gold wrapped packages that represented a combined value approaching 6 figures. They started with the smaller gifts, laughing and thanking each giver as expensive crystal and silverware emerged from tissue paper like archaeological treasures. The Baccarat vase from the French ambassador, the Lalique sculpture from David's Harvard roommate, the vintage Cartier bracelet from his great-aunt, a woman who collected jewelry the way other people collected stamps. Each gift was photographed, cataloged, and added to the growing display of material abundance that surrounded the happy couple like a fortress of expensive expectations. Then Emma reached for one of my silver boxes, her manicured fingers handling it with the casual confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything she truly wanted. "This one's pretty," she said, examining the elegant wrapping with approval. Her voice carried clearly in the attentive silence, every word captured by the professional videographer for posterity. "No card?" "There's a note inside," I called out, my voice carrying just enough to be heard without drawing attention to my position. Several guests turned to look at me, but their gazes slid past without recognition, seeing only another anonymous server facilitating their entertainment. From an admirer, Emma tore off the paper with childish enthusiasm, revealing a simple wooden box that looked almost modest compared to the elaborate presentations surrounding it. The contrast was deliberate. Sometimes the most powerful weapons came in the smallest packages. Inside, nestled in black velvet like a sleeping serpent, was a stock certificate printed on heavy paper with ornate borders. Official, legal, and worth more than everything else on the table combined. She frowned, holding it up to the light as if checking for watermarks or hidden meanings. Nexus Industries, she read aloud, her voice carrying a note of confusion. 1,000 shares? She looked puzzled, passing it to David with the expression of someone who'd received a gift in a foreign language. Is this some kind of joke? David's expression was more serious as he examined the certificate with the practiced eye of someone who'd been raised to recognize value in all its forms. His face went pale as understanding dawned, his hands trembling slightly as he held the paper. Nexus Industries. That's the tech company that's been buying up half of Silicon Valley, he said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. These shares, if they're real. He looked up, scanning the crowd with sudden intensity. If these are real, this single certificate is worth more than everything else on this table combined. The murmur that rippled through the crowd was electric, charged with the kind of energy that accompanied truly shocking revelations. Phones appeared as guests tried to process what they were witnessing. The quiet ceremony transformed into breaking news. Oh, they're real. I stepped forward, my server's uniform suddenly feeling like armor, like a costume I was ready to shed. Congratulations on your wedding gift. David's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing as he tried to place my voice. There was something familiar there, something that tickled the edges of memory without quite breaking through. Do I know you? You should. I reached up with deliberate slowness and removed the black wig I'd been wearing, letting my natural dark hair fall to my shoulders in waves that caught the light. My fingers found the colored contact lenses next, revealing the brown eyes that had once looked at him with complete trust. After all, you were going to marry me. The silence that followed was absolute, profound, the kind of quiet that preceded earthquakes and avalanches. Emma's face went white as she stared at me, the stock certificate trembling in her hands like a leaf in a hurricane. David stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard. Maya? His voice was barely a whisper, broken and disbelieving. But you died. We went to your funeral. I gave a eulogy. I threw dirt on your casket. Disappointed? I smiled, enjoying the way he flinched as if I'd slapped him. Don't worry, I got better. Death has a way of clarifying one's priorities, of showing you exactly who deserves your loyalty and who deserves your wrath. Emma found her voice first, always quick to recover from shock, always ready to fight for what she considered rightfully hers. This is impossible. You're dead. I saw your body in the casket. I spoke at your funeral. I watched them lower you into the ground. You spoke beautifully, I acknowledged with a mock sincerity. Very moving. I especially liked the part where you announced your engagement over my casket. Such impeccable timing, such a touching tribute to your grief. The guests were murmuring now, phones appearing like weapons as people tried to process what they were witnessing. Social media would be buzzing within minutes, hashtags forming and trending as the Morrison-Chen wedding became the kind of scandal that destroyed reputations and ended careers. How? David's word came out strangled, desperate. How are you alive? How is this possible? Trade secret. I opened the second silver box with theatrical flair, revealing another stock certificate, this one even more ornate than the first. But I've been very busy since my resurrection. Building an empire, making friends, acquiring companies, settling old scores. Did you know I now own Morrison Industries' 3 largest suppliers? David's face went ashen, the color draining from his features like water from a broken dam. His father leaned forward from the family table, suddenly very interested in the conversation that was about to reshape his world. That's impossible, the elder Morrison said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd spent decades believing in his own invincibility. We have exclusive contracts with Consolidated Materials, Pacific Logistics, and Northern Manufacturing. ironclad agreements that, with subsidiaries of Nexus Industries, I finished smoothly, savoring the moment of understanding that flickered across his face. Funny how paperwork can be so misleading when shell companies and holding corporations are involved. Your ironclad agreements are with companies I've owned for the past 18 months. The third box opened with a soft click that seemed to echo like a gunshot in the silent ballroom. This certificate was different, larger, more ornate, with the Nexus Industries logo embossed in gold at the top and my signature flowing across the bottom in permanent ink. "This is my real wedding gift," I announced, holding it up for everyone to see. The paper caught the light, seeming to glow with its own internal fire. 51% controlling interest in Nexus Industries transferred to Mrs. Emma Morrison. Congratulations, sister. You're now the majority shareholder in a company worth approximately $4 billion. The ballroom erupted. Guests surged forward, trying to get a better look at the certificate that represented more wealth than most of them would see in their lifetimes. Phones flashed as people documented the unprecedented scene. The wedding reception transformed into a financial news event. Emma sat frozen, staring at the paper in her hands as if it might burst into flames. Her perfect makeup was starting to run, mascara creating dark rivers down her cheeks as the magnitude of what she was holding began to sink in. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice lost in the chaos surrounding us. "Why would you give me this? Why would you make me rich?" "Because I want you to have everything you've always wanted," I replied sweetly, my voice cutting through the noise with practiced clarity. "Power, money, status, the kind of wealth that opens every door and grants every wish. It's all yours now, Emma, everything you dreamed of when you were stealing my life piece by piece." David grabbed my arm, his grip tight enough to leave bruises, his fingers digging into my flesh with desperate intensity. "What's the catch? There's always a catch with you, Maya. What do you want in return?" I looked down at his hand with the kind of cold disdain I'd learned from watching his mother dismiss servants. He released me immediately, as if my skin had burned him. "The shares come with certain voting restrictions," I explained, with the patience of a teacher addressing particularly slow students. "You'll own 51% of Nexus Industries, but you won't be able to vote those shares for the next 50 years. They're held in trust with very specific conditions for release." "What conditions?" Emma's voice was sharp with growing understanding, cutting through her earlier confusion like a blade through silk. "Full disclosure of your personal finances, regular audits by my accounting firm, and most importantly," I paused, savoring the moment like a fine wine, "public acknowledgement of how you acquired your new wealth. Press releases, interviews, documentary participation, the full story of your rise to power, including the part where you systematically destroyed your adopted sister's life, stole her fiancé, and drove her to suicide." The word hung in the air like a toxic cloud, poisoning the celebration with its implications. Emma's face crumpled as the full scope of my trap became clear, the beautiful mask she wore for the world cracking to reveal the ugly reality beneath. David released her hand as if it had caught fire, stepping away from her with the instinctive revulsion of someone who'd suddenly realized they were standing next to a landmine. "You can't do this," Emma said desperately, her voice rising to a pitch that made several guests wince. "This is blackmail. This is extortion." "This is justice," I corrected with calm precision. "This is you reaping exactly what you've sown, harvesting the crop you planted with your choices. You have two options: accept the gift and the conditions, or refuse it entirely. But choose quickly. The SEC filing deadline is Monday morning, and these transfers need to be official by close of business." Mrs. Morrison had gone very pale, her carefully applied makeup doing nothing to hide the horror spreading across her face. "The scandal, our family's reputation, the country club membership. We'll survive," I said dismissively, waving away her concerns like annoying insects. "Rich people weather scandals all the time. Look at the Kennedys, the Trumps, the British royal family. Money has a way of making people forget inconvenient truths, though I imagine the country club might be a bit awkward for a while." David was staring at the certificates as if they were venomous snakes, his mind clearly racing through the implications. $4 billion? Give or take a few $100 million. Tech valuations fluctuate with market conditions. I shrugged with studied indifference. Of course, without voting rights, you'll be essentially powerless. Rich, but powerless. Rather like being a very expensive pet. Well-fed and comfortable, but entirely dependent on your owner's goodwill. I won't do it, Emma said suddenly, standing so fast her chair toppled backward with a crash that made several guests jump. I won't be your puppet. I won't dance to your twisted music. Your choice entirely. I began gathering the certificates with the calm efficiency of someone who'd expected this reaction. I'm sure the IRS will be very interested to learn about the offshore accounts you've been using to hide David's family money, and the pregnancy you've been concealing to speed up this wedding, and the little matter of the insurance fraud from my supposed suicide. Emma went dead white, the last vestiges of color draining from her face as if I'd opened a vein. How do you know about... I know everything. I slipped the certificates back into their boxes with the care of someone handling dangerous explosives. I've had 3 years to investigate, plan, and prepare. 3 years to build a network of private investigators, forensic accountants, and legal specialists. Did you really think I'd come back from the dead without doing my homework? The photographer was still snapping pictures, documenting every moment of Emma's humiliation for posterity. By tomorrow, this would be front-page news across the business world. By next week, it would be a case study in MBA programs and psychology textbooks. What do you want from us? David asked quietly, his voice carrying the defeat of a man who'd finally realized he was outmatched. Nothing, I said simply, the word carrying more weight than any threat could have managed. I want absolutely nothing from either of you. You've already given me everything I needed, the motivation to build something better than anything you could ever destroy. I headed toward the exit, then paused at the gift table, my hand resting on the remaining presents like a queen surveying her domain. Oh, and Emma? The baby you're carrying isn't David's. The DNA test results should arrive Monday morning, along with the paternity confirmation for Dr. Stevens' son. You remember Dr. Stevens, don't you? The Morrison family physician who's been so attentive during your recent medical appointments? Emma's strangled cry followed me out of the ballroom, but I didn't look back. I had more important places to be, more significant things to accomplish than watching the collapse of people who'd chosen their own destruction. The hotel lobby was blissfully quiet after the chaos of the reception, the marble floors gleaming under crystal chandeliers that cast rainbow patterns on the walls. I changed out of my server's uniform in the ladies' room, emerging in the black Armani dress I'd worn to my company's IPO. Professional, powerful, untouchable. The kind of woman who commanded respect rather than begging for it, who inspired fear rather than pity, who had learned to weaponize success in ways her younger self could never have imagined. My driver was waiting by the entrance, the Rolls-Royce gleaming under the hotel's lights like a black pearl. Henri had been with me for 2 years, a former military man who understood the value of discretion and the importance of loyalty. As we pulled away from the Morrison Chen wedding disaster, I allowed myself a small smile of satisfaction. Somewhere behind us, Emma and David were dealing with the wreckage of their perfect day, their fairy tale ending transformed into a nightmare of legal complications and social scandal. "Where to, Miss Laurent?" Henri asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror with the professional concern of someone who'd witnessed my transformation from broken refugee to global powerhouse. "The Nexus building," I replied, settling back into the leather seats that had been custom designed for my exact proportions. "I have some late-night work to finish." Through the car's tinted windows, I watched the city blur past in streams of light and shadow. Somewhere in those towers of glass and steel, decisions were being made that would reshape the global economy. Somewhere in those boardrooms, my competitors were plotting their next moves, unaware that their most dangerous rival had just publicly announced her resurrection. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. "Media requests coming in faster than we can log them. CNN wants an exclusive interview about the wedding incident. The Wall Street Journal is offering 7 figures for your story. Forbes wants to put you on the cover. How should I respond?" I typed back quickly, "Schedule the interviews for next week, and make sure they know this is just the beginning. The Maya Chen story is far from over." The Nexus Industries building rose before us, 60 floors of glass and steel reaching into the night sky like a modern Tower of Babel. My empire, built from nothing but determination in the ashes of my first life's failures. Every floor represented a small victory, every employee a person who believed in my vision of a world where merit mattered more than connections, where intelligence trumped inheritance, where the future belonged to those brave enough to seize it. In my office on the top floor, I poured myself a glass of vintage Dom Perignon and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The urban landscape sprawled beneath me like a circuit board, millions of lights representing millions of dreams, most of which would never be realized. Somewhere out there, Emma was probably crying into her ruined wedding dress, while David tried to explain tonight's events to his father. Somewhere in those darkened streets, my adoptive parents were fielding phone calls from reporters and friends, trying to understand how their dead daughter had become a billionaire. But I wasn't thinking about them anymore. They were the past, footnotes in a story that had moved far beyond their ability to influence or control. I was thinking about the future, the hospitals I was planning to fund, the scholarships for orphaned children, the research grants for scientists working on projects that could change the world. Money was just a tool, power just a means to an end. The real victory wasn't destroying Emma and David. It was building something so much better than anything they could ever imagine. My phone rang, displaying an unknown number. I considered letting it go to voicemail, then decided to answer. In my experience, the most interesting calls came from unexpected sources. Maya? The voice was tentative, hopeful, weighted with years of guilt and desperate love. Maya, is that really you? Mom. Of course she'd gotten my number somehow, probably from one of the wedding guests who'd put the pieces together faster than others. Social media made it impossible to stay hidden once someone decided to look. Hello, Mother. I kept my voice neutral, professional, the tone I'd use with any business acquaintance who'd failed to meet expectations. Oh, honey, I can't believe you're alive. Where have you been? Why didn't you tell us? We mourned you. We grieved. We blamed ourselves. You mourned the daughter who was convenient to lose, I interrupted, my words cutting through her protestations like a scalpel through infected tissue. The one who never quite measured up to Emma's standards. The one whose death cleared the way for your perfect family narrative. That's not fair, Maya. You know we loved you. You loved the idea of me, I corrected, walking to my desk where the adoption papers lay open like an indictment. The grateful orphan who should be thankful for whatever scraps of affection you threw my way. But you never loved me enough to choose me over Emma, not once, in 23 years. The silence stretched between us, filled with years of unspoken resentment and missed opportunities, weighted with the knowledge that some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. Can we talk? Mom asked finally, her voice breaking with emotion that might have moved me once. Can we try to work this out? You're my daughter, Maya. That has to count for something. It counted for everything, I said softly, letting her hear the pain she'd caused, the wounds that had festered for years before finally healing into scars. Until it didn't. Until you let Emma destroy my life while you watched and did nothing. Until you chose her happiness over my survival. She was young, she made mistakes. She was 30 when she seduced my fiancé at my own funeral, I said, each word precise as a surgical cut. That wasn't a mistake, Mother. That was a choice. Your choice to enable her, my choice to trust you both despite every warning sign. I walked to my desk, running my fingers over the stack of adoption papers I'd found in Emma's belongings after my death. Papers that showed I wasn't the charity case I'd always believed myself to be, but the daughter of a wealthy tech entrepreneur who died in a car accident when I was 5. Papers that showed our parents had been paid handsomely to raise me, not out of kindness, but as part of a trust agreement that included funds for my education, my health care, my future. Money that had been systematically diverted to fund Emma's privileges while I was told we couldn't afford my college applications. I know about the trust fund, I said quietly, my voice carrying across the phone line like a death sentence. I know about the money my real parents left for my education. I know where every penny went. Mom's sharp intake of breath told me everything I needed to know about her guilt, her knowledge, her complicity in the theft that had shaped my entire life. Maya, we can explain? You stole my inheritance to pay for Emma's life, I continued, each revelation landing like a physical blow. Every opportunity you denied me, every advantage you gave her, it was bought with money that belonged to me. Money that could have changed everything if you'd honored your legal obligations instead of your emotional preferences. We did what we thought was best for both of you. You did what was easiest, I corrected, my patience finally exhausted. You took the money and ran, betting that I'd never be smart enough or motivated enough to discover the truth. You were wrong about that, just like you were wrong about everything else. I hung up before she could respond, then turned off my phone. Tomorrow would bring more calls, more attempts at reconciliation, more people trying to capitalize on my newfound visibility and fortune. But tonight was mine, a moment of perfect silence in the eye of the storm I'd created. I opened my laptop and pulled up the Nexus Industries quarterly report, scanning the numbers that represented 3 years of relentless work and strategic brilliance. Revenue was up 30% year over year. Our AI division had just landed a major government contract worth $2 billion, and our biotech subsidiary was on the verge of a breakthrough that could revolutionize cancer treatment. All of it built without Emma's help, without our parents' support, without David's love. Built with nothing but intelligence, determination, and the bitter fuel of betrayal, transformed into rocket fuel for success. My assistant had left a stack of thank you cards on my desk, responses to the scholarships we'd awarded this quarter. 25 bright, ambitious kids who would get the chances I'd been denied, funded by the company I'd built from nothing but spite and stubbornness. That was worth more than any revenge, more satisfying than any public humiliation. The city sparkled below me as I worked through the night, planning acquisitions and charitable donations, board meetings, and press conferences. By dawn, the entire business world would know that Maya Chen was alive, successful, and very much in control of her own destiny. Emma and David could keep their wedding gifts and their complicated conditions. I had something better, a future built on my own terms, without owing anything to anyone who'd ever looked down on me. As the sun rose over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber, I allowed myself one last thought about the family I'd left behind. They'd made their choices long ago, prioritizing appearances over love, convenience over loyalty, Emma's happiness over my survival. Now they'd have to live with the consequences while I got on with the business of living well. Success, as they said, was the best revenge, and I was just getting started. 6 months later, I stood at the podium of the Global Economic Forum in Davos, delivering the keynote address on entrepreneurship and second chances to an audience of world leaders, tech titans, and financial powerhouses. The auditorium was packed, every seat filled with people who commanded billions of dollars and influenced millions of lives. In the front row, I spotted familiar faces: business leaders who'd dismissed me in my first life, investors who'd refused to fund my early ventures, competitors who'd tried to steal my ideas when I was vulnerable. They hung on every word now, taking notes as I described the journey from failure to success, the lessons learned from betrayal, the power of turning pain into purpose. The woman who'd once been ignored at networking events was now the featured speaker at the most important business conference in the world. The greatest gift my enemies ever gave me, I concluded, my voice carrying clearly through the packed auditorium, was the motivation to prove them wrong. Every door they slammed shut, every opportunity they denied, every moment they made me feel small, it all became fuel for something bigger than they could ever imagine. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, a thunderous roar of approval that felt like vindication for every slight I'd ever endured. Afterward, reporters crowded around, asking about my plans for the future, my thoughts on forgiveness, my advice for other entrepreneurs who'd faced similar challenges. "Do you regret coming back?" one journalist asked, her voice cutting through the crowd noise. "Do you ever wish you'd stayed dead and avoided all the pain of confronting your past?" I smiled, thinking of the life I'd built from nothing, the people I'd helped, the changes I'd made possible, the justice I'd finally achieved. "Never," I said, my voice carrying absolute conviction. Death taught me what really mattered. Life gave me the chance to do something about it, and sometimes the phoenix has to burn completely before it can rise from the ashes stronger than ever before. That evening, my assistant handed me an invitation that had arrived by courier, delivered on the same expensive stationery Emma had used for her wedding invitations. It was a request for a meeting from Emma and David Morrison, signed in handwriting that trembled with desperation. They wanted to discuss mutually beneficial arrangements regarding their Nexus Industries shares, to explore creative solutions to their current situation, to find common ground for moving forward. I dropped it in the trash without reading the details. Some gifts, once given, couldn't be taken back. Some bridges, once burned, were better left as ashes. Some lessons could only be learned through consequences, and some people only understood power when it was wielded against them. My real family was waiting for me at the restaurant. My executive team, my mentors, the handful of friends who'd stood by me when I had nothing to offer but hope and determination. People who'd chosen to believe in me not because they had to, but because they wanted to. As we raised our glasses in a toast to the future, I realized that revenge had never been the point. The point was proving that love, real love, wasn't something you could steal or destroy or replace with manipulation and cruelty. It was something you built, choice by choice, day by day, with people who saw your worth when you couldn't see it yourself. Emma had taken David, but she'd never taken my capacity to love or be loved. She'd stolen my inheritance, but she couldn't steal my ability to create wealth. She'd tried to erase me, but she'd only made me stronger, more determined, more dangerous than she could have imagined. In the end, the best revenge wasn't destroying my enemies. It was becoming someone they could never touch again, someone who'd transcended their ability to hurt or diminish or control. My phone buzzed with a notification from my charity foundation. Another scholarship recipient had just graduated summa cum laude from MIT. A kid from the foster system, just like I'd been, who'd used our funding to build a better life and was now working on artificial intelligence systems that could revolutionize healthcare. That was worth more than all the stock certificates in the world, more valuable than any public humiliation or private satisfaction. To second chances, I said, raising my glass to the table of people who'd become my chosen family. The ones who'd proven that blood meant nothing compared to loyalty, that genetics were irrelevant next to genuine affection. To second chances, they echoed, their voices harmonizing in perfect agreement. And in that moment, surrounded by love freely given and freely received, I knew that I'd finally won the only battle that mattered, the one for my own soul, my own peace, my own understanding of what it meant to be truly alive. The rest was just business, just the epilogue to a story that had always been about transformation rather than revenge, about rising rather than falling, about proving that sometimes the best way to defeat your enemies is to become everything they said you could never be. Maya Chen was dead. Sophie Laurent was eternal, and the future belonged to those brave enough to seize it from the ashes of their past.